Hey, Silent Pages fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe. Now stay with us. The story begins. The Apex was not a hospital. At least, not in the way ordinary people imagine one. It was a monument. A temple of chrome and glass built to worship perfection. Every corridor sounded like an echo chamber carved from ice. Every surface reflected soft, surgical white light. Nurses moved in straight lines, speaking in short, clipped sentences. Machines hummed with the calm confidence of technology that knew it could not fail. And at the center of this mechanical kingdom stood Dr. Elijah Ward. The doors of operating room 5 slid open with a muted hiss as Elijah stepped inside. He didn't walk. He glided, the way someone moved who had rehearsed every gesture of his life to the level of instinct. The surgical staff stiffened, adjusting their posture as if gravity tightened around them. Everyone in the room knew who he was. The Apex wasn't just his workplace. It was his empire. Elijah glanced at the patient already prepped on the table. A 56-year-old man with a failing heart, no remaining medical options, and only one hope, Elijah's hands. The monitors buzzed slowly, as though waiting for his command. Vitals? Elijah asked. Stable, replied the anesthesiologist. Ready when you are, Dr. Ward. He didn't answer with words. He simply extended his hands. Gloves slipped over his fingers. A scalpel touched his palm. The world narrowed to a perfect line of intention. Elijah began. The opening incision was flawlessly straight. No trembling. No hesitation. Every assistant adjusted to his rhythm without needing instructions. He worked like a machine that had learned empathy only through repeated observation, but never truly understood it. A heart transplant was not a gentle process. It was the choreography of life and death. The removal, the replacement, the reconnection. Every second mattered. Every millimeter mattered. Every beat of the clock threatened everything. But Elijah was calm. He always was. Inside his mind, absolute silence. Inside his chest, nothing at all. While he worked, he didn't think of the man on the table as a person with a history, with fears, with a family. He thought of him as a system with broken components. The system needed to function again, so he would fix it. This was the philosophy of the Apex. This was Elijah's gospel. After 2 long hours, the new heart beat for the first time. It was a soft thump, like a hesitant knock on a door. Elijah studied the rhythm, his eyes cold and precise. Successful graft, he said. Proceed to closure. The team exhaled. Whispers rustled around him. Amazing, flawless, he's a genius. He ignored them. Praise wasn't information, so it wasn't worth processing. When Elijah finally stepped out of the operating room, the lights in the corridor seemed too bright. He rolled his shoulders once, as if loosening a pair of invisible chains. A nurse hurried over to hand him a report. Elijah scanned it, nodded, and walked without breaking stride toward the recovery wing. He always checked on the patient immediately after surgery, but his version of checking was purely mechanical. Vitals, neurological response, wound stability, post-op status. When he entered the recovery room, the patient lay unconscious, surrounded by the soft beep of monitors. The man's wife sat in the corner, trembling with relief. She stood instantly. Dr. Ward, thank you. Thank you, you saved his life. Elijah lifted a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. It is too early to determine the long-term outcome. Monitor him closely. I will review his status in 1 hour. The woman froze, confused by his coldness. Her gratitude had nowhere to go. Elijah had no space for it. He turned away from her and adjusted the 4 rate. Numbers mattered. Emotions didn't. As he left, the door opened from the other side. A woman stepped in, holding a tablet, a stack of notes, and a cup of herbal tea that clearly didn't fit the sterile energy of the clinic. Lily Moreno, the new therapist. Day 1 on the job. She smiled at Elijah, warm and sincere, the kind of smile that softened the air around her. Dr. Ward, I'm Lily. I'm here to begin post-op emotional evaluation. Elijah blinked once, slowly. Emotional evaluation is unnecessary at this stage. Physical stabilization is the priority. Physical health is affected by emotional state, Lily replied gently, especially after something as traumatic as a heart failure and transplant. The patient is unconscious, Elijah said. His emotional state is irrelevant. Lily studied him with a calm, unhurried gaze that somehow felt more invasive than any surgical tool. You know, she said softly, your patient's wife is terrified. She thinks she's losing him even though his vitals are perfect. You didn't reassure her at all. That is not my job, Elijah answered. Maybe that's the problem. The words hit him like a scalpel dropped into a silent room. Not because they were rude, they weren't. Not because they were emotional, they were. But because they were true in a way he couldn't afford to acknowledge. Elijah dismissed her with a curt nod. If you'll excuse me, I have to prepare for another procedure. And he walked away. Lily watched him leave, her expression a mixture of curiosity and sadness. She turned back to the recovering patient, noticing the tension in his face, even under sedation. "Poor man," she whispered. "Your body's healing. But your heart, your real heart, has a long way to go." She placed her hand gently on the patient's arm, a human gesture in a place that had forgotten humanity. Behind her, the light from the hallway cast a long, cold shadow. The apex was a machine, and today, Lily had just met its sharpest blade. The morning after the surgery began quietly, almost too quietly for Elijah's liking. The surgical wing usually hummed with a predictable rhythm, machines beeping in steady intervals, nurses moving with rehearsed precision, the world obeying the rules of biology and engineering. But today, something fell off in the air, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The patient, Noah Cartwright, initially showed textbook-perfect recovery signs. Stable vitals, clean neurological readouts, no inflammation markers. For the first 12 hours, Elijah considered the transplant one of his cleanest executions of technique. He even allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. But by the next morning, the anomaly emerged. Noah woke up trembling, not physically, but emotionally, in a way Elijah couldn't quantify. The man clutched at his chest as though something inside him recoiled. His voice cracked, saying he felt disconnected from himself, like the heart wasn't listening. He panicked whenever he looked at his own reflection, as if he no longer recognized the person staring back. Elijah immediately called for imaging, blood panels, neurological screens. Each test returned the same frustrating conclusion: normal. Perfectly normal. Every measurable system behaved exactly as it should. And yet the patient fell apart in front of them. When Noah's oxygen saturation briefly dipped despite open airways, Elijah blamed the monitors. When the tremors increased, he blamed the bed sensors. When the man cried out that the heart felt wrong, Elijah blamed stress, anesthesia, anything except something he couldn't measure. The nurses exchanged worried looks, whispers trailing behind him as he moved from machine to machine. He could feel their doubt like pressure beneath his skin, but he ignored it. The world made sense only when everything was mechanical, predictable, explainable. And this inexplicable emotional collapse, was a threat he refused to acknowledge. Lily stepped into the patient's room that afternoon, drawn by Noah's spiraling distress. She approached him gently, letting him speak before offering any interpretation. Elijah watched from the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight. Lily suggested something he considered absurd, that Noah's body accepted the heart, but Noah himself had not. She spoke with soft certainty, describing a form of emotional rejection, a psychological severing between identity and the new organ's presence. Her tone was not dramatic, only compassionate. Elijah cut her off with cold precision. "This is medicine, not poetry," he said, as if issuing a diagnosis of incompetence. To him, emotions were noise, irrelevant, unquantifiable, useless. But Lily stood her ground. She explained that traumatic transplants often cause crises of identity, that patients could feel invaded rather than healed. She mentioned cases, published, verified, medically recognized, where fear, grief, or guilt triggered physiological symptoms despite perfect labs. Her voice remained steady, but Elijah could see the flicker of hurt behind her eyes when he dismissed her again. He spoke with the sharpness of a man protecting a worldview he couldn't afford to lose. She wasn't wrong, but she represented everything he refused to confront. In her silence afterward, he could hear the first emotional crack forming between them. Later that day, hospital leadership summoned Elijah to a boardroom filled with polished wood, steel chairs, and anxious administrators. They pressed him in tight, careful phrasing. The case was attracting attention. The patient's family had questions. The department needed clarity. Elijah felt cornered, judged for something he hadn't yet defined. He defended the procedure with technical perfection, but he sensed the board wanted not facts, but reassurance, something he didn't know how to give. Meanwhile, back in the patient's room, two nurses whispered to Lily that they believed her theory. They had seen patients break before machines ever did. They told her that Noah's panic looked like grief, not organ failure. Lily listened, absorbing their support, but the earlier confrontation with Elijah lingered in her chest like a bruise. By nightfall, Noah's emotional collapse reached a breaking point. He curled inward, gripping the bedsheets, tears staining the pillow as he gasped that the heart didn't belong to him. He begged for something he couldn't name: comfort, understanding, or simply a reason for the chaos inside him. Lily stayed with him, grounding him with breathing guidance, anchoring him with calm words. Elijah returned only long enough to check the monitors again, and again, and again. He couldn't accept what he saw, a flawless machine paired with a human soul in pieces. This was the moment their ideological war truly began. Lily, moved by empathy. Elijah, blinded by certainty. And Noah, broken between them, became the battlefield neither of them could ignore. The crisis came just before dawn, when the corridors of St. Astra Hospital were still wrapped in their pale blue hush. Elijah was reviewing Noah's latest scans, still perfect, still useless, when a paramedic burst through the ICU doors, pushing a gurney with a girl no older than 15. Her body was limp with shock, but her breaths came fast and shallow, like someone drowning on dry land. Severe internal bleeding, irregular cardiac rhythm, systemic collapse imminent. Elijah saw it all within seconds, reading her scans like a language only he understood. She needed surgery immediately, within the hour, or she wouldn't survive. It was the kind of case that sharpens every instinct he ever honed. But there was a complication he couldn't ignore. The girl jolted awake in violent panic the moment anyone touched her. She screamed when the oxygen mask approached. She ripped off electrodes with trembling hands. Her terror wasn't confusion. It was absolute, spiraling, suffocating fear. Her panic disorder was so severe that sedation alone could kill her. Her nervous system was in full revolt. Elijah's plan froze in place. For the first time in years, he encountered a purely medical barrier he couldn't cut through, splice apart, or out-strategize with technique. He knew the science of her condition, but not the human part, the emotional mechanism spiraling out of control. And that was when Lily entered the room. He didn't call for her. She came because she heard the girl's screams echoing down the hallway. Lily approached the patient slowly, lowering herself to the girl's eye level. She didn't speak immediately. She didn't touch her. She simply breathed, deep, slow, rhythmic breaths, and allowed the girl to match her pace. Elijah watched, arms stiff at his sides, trying to calculate the mechanics of what she was doing. There were none. Lily whispered grounding cues. She named objects in the room. She guided the girl's trembling hands to feel the cool metal rail of the bed. Sensory anchors, emotional regulation, the kinds of concepts Elijah had dismissed as pseudoscience. And yet, slowly, undeniably, the girl's breathing softened. Her fingers unclenched. Her eyes stopped darting wildly. For the first time, Elijah had to admit Lily's presence wasn't a distraction. It was a necessity. He didn't like the feeling. When he finally spoke, his voice was clipped, more formal than usual. She needs surgery within the hour. I can't operate unless you keep her stable. So do whatever you need to do. Lily glanced up at him with cautious surprise. Not quite gratitude, not quite victory, just an acknowledgement that he had taken the first step toward meeting her halfway. All right, she said softly. But you'll need to adjust your approach too. Her panic will spike if she wakes up disoriented. She needs predictability, even in surgery. He hated that she was right again. Reluctantly, they built a combined treatment plan. He outlined physiological requirements, blood stabilization, controlled ventilation, timing. She added emotional provisions, gentle communication, sensory consistency, a slow induction process. Their voices overlapped in tense, clipped negotiations, each refusing to fully trust the other's logic. But for the first time, they were speaking the same language, even if in different dialects. When the girl was wheeled into pre-op, she clutched Lily's hand with white-knuckled desperation. Lily stayed close, reassuring her with a steady whisper, keeping her anchored in the present. Elijah prepared his instruments, glancing at them more often than he meant to. Watching Lily work elicited a strange feeling, a mix of curiosity and irritation. He analyzed her methods like a scientist confronted with a phenomenon he couldn't fully explain. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't improvising. She understood the human brain with an expertise he had underestimated. Just before sedation, the girl looked at Elijah with wide, terrified eyes. "Will I wake up?" she whispered. Elijah hesitated. The truth lodged in his chest. He wasn't accustomed to emotional answers. Lily stepped in. "You will. We're both here. We won't let anything happen to you." The girl relaxed, and Elijah felt something shift, sharp, unexpected, unwelcome. Respect. Reluctant, fragile, but real. The surgery itself unfolded like a strange duet. Elijah's command of anatomy was flawless, every movement precise. Meanwhile, Lily monitored the girl's emotional responses through micro-twitches, heartbeat variability, even the subtle changes in muscle tension. She warned Elijah before spikes occurred, guiding him through moments he would have missed. He found himself relying on her without realizing it. When they closed the incision and the girl stabilized, the room felt lighter, charged with something neither of them had planned for. As they stepped out into the empty hallway, there was a moment, just a breath, where their eyes met. Not hostility, not superiority. Something softer, something unspoken. the first tiny spark that suggested the conflict between them might eventually become something else. Elijah broke eye contact first. Lily didn't push, but the shift was there, impossible to ignore. For the first time, they weren't opponents. They were partners, forced together, but unexpectedly effective. And beneath the tension, beneath the friction, a quiet new current began to form. One neither of them was prepared to name. The day after the surgery felt strangely suspended, like the hospital itself was holding its breath. The young patient was stable, recovering better than anyone expected. Nurses whispered about it. How the impossible case had turned around. How Lily's presence had made some kind of difference even the machines couldn't quantify. Lily tried to brush aside the praise, but she noticed something more pressing. Elijah was unraveling. Not in obvious ways. He still walked with that same surgeon's confidence, precise and untouchable. But she saw the microfractures, tiny, silent signs no algorithm would ever catch. The way his shoulders stiffened at every beep of a monitor. The clipped tone when residents asked questions. The empty look in his eyes when he stared too long at the board, as if trying to outrun a memory. Burnout. Not the simple, overworked kind. This was something deeper, older, calcified. Lily sensed it long before she understood it. That afternoon, Lily stopped by the staff lounge. The room smelled like burnt coffee and long shifts. Two senior nurses were talking quietly, too quietly, as if their words carried weight. They didn't notice Lily until she stepped closer. "It's happening again," one whispered. "He's pushing himself too hard. Like back then." "Since that case?" the other murmured. Lily's ears sharpened. She pretended to search for tea, giving them space to keep talking. "Ever since the Kovacs girl," the first nurse said. "He never forgave himself." "Not really." Lily froze. The Kovacs girl. She'd seen the name earlier while reviewing complex cardiac cases, but the file had been locked with higher clearance. She'd assumed it was routine privacy, not a wound carved into the hospital's collective memory. The nurses noticed Lily then, startled. One tried to brush past her gently. Don't mention it to him. It's not something he handles well." But their warning only sharpened her curiosity and her concern. Later, Lily walked past the observation deck overlooking or3. Inside, Elijah was prepping for a minor procedure, but his movements were different today, too rigid, too mechanical. Not precision. Armor. She watched him from behind the glass. For a moment, he looked less like a man and more like a silhouette trapped behind reflection, brilliant, but lonely. When he finished and stepped into the hallway, he caught her staring. His eyes narrowed just barely. "Is there something you needed?" His voice carried that familiar, chilly professionalism. Lily hesitated, but only for a breath. "You're exhausted," she said softly, and trying very hard not to be. Elijah froze as if she'd touched a nerve. "I'm functioning perfectly fine." "That's not what I said." His jaw flexed. "Your assessments are appreciated, but unnecessary. And yet," she continued, "your entire body disagrees." For a split second, he looked shaken. Then he locked himself down again. "This line of conversation is inappropriate. Someone told me about the Kovacs case." That stopped him cold. His pupils tightened. His breath hitched, so small the average person would miss it, but Lily didn't. "Who?" His voice wasn't cold now. It was dangerous. "I wasn't digging," she said quickly. People talk, Elijah. They're worried." He stepped closer, the distance shrinking fast. "I don't discuss that case. Ever." The air thickened. But Lily didn't back away. "You lost someone," she said gently. "Someone whose death changed you. Someone you haven't allowed yourself to mourn." His face went blank. Too blank. "That's enough, Lily." She saw the truth behind his reaction, not anger. Fear. A fracture in the ice. He turned away, but she wasn't finished. "I'm not here to shame you or expose you," she said. "I just want to understand why someone who cares so much pretends he doesn't care at all." He froze mid-step. For a moment, just a flicker, Elijah looked like he might actually speak. His shoulders dropped. His lips parted. His eyes softened, almost imperceptibly, as if a memory brushed against him too painfully to ignore. But then, he retreated. Emotionally, physically, completely. "Whatever you think you know about me," he said quietly, "you're wrong." He walked away, the conversation unfinished, the truth still sealed behind walls that were clearly beginning to crack. Later that evening, Lily reviewed patient charts in the dim light of the therapy wing. She sensed someone leaning in the doorway. She didn't look up immediately. "Elijah," she said softly, "did you come to yell at me again?" But when she lifted her eyes, she saw something else. He wasn't angry. He looked lost. "I don't want you digging into my past," he said, but the edge was gone. "I don't want to revisit it." Lily put down her pen. "You don't have to tell me anything. But you don't have to face it alone either." His throat tightened. Another crack. He looked at her for a long moment, something fragile flickering across his expression. trust almost forming, almost landing. Then he shut down. Again. Good night, Lily. His voice was barely above a whisper. And he left. But the damage was done. Or rather, the healing had begun. The ice around Elijah wasn't shattered yet. But for the first time, it wasn't whole. Morning light spilled through the polished glass walls of the apex, turning the corridors into silver tunnels. But despite the sterile brilliance, tension clung to the air like static, sharp, invisible, waiting. Lily felt it the second she stepped into the conference room. Elijah was already there, standing at the head of the table, tablet in hand, back straight, eyes cold. He didn't look up when she entered, but she sensed him stiffen, just slightly, just enough to reveal that her presence affected him more than he wanted to admit. The shared case, the young girl with panic disorder, had stabilized overnight physically, but her psychological state remained fragile. The staff was hopeful. Elijah was impatient. Lily was worried. The stage was set. Elijah flicked open a holographic chart with a precise motion. Vitals are improving. Blood pressure normalized. Oxygen saturation at optimal levels. She's ready. Lily frowned. Ready physically, not emotionally. She's stable, Elijah said, finally meeting her eyes. And with a probability curve projecting a 26% risk increase each additional day, delaying the surgery is statistically irresponsible. Lily crossed her arms, refusing to soften her stance. And pushing her when she's terrified is psychologically dangerous. She hasn't even processed yesterday's panic episode. She doesn't need processing, he snapped. She needs intervention. She needs safety, Lily countered. Their voices echoed off the glass walls, sharp, clashing, too raw to be purely professional. Behind Lily's calm face was frustration, burning, protective, fierce. Behind Elijah's controlled exterior was something else, fear disguised as logic. Fear of losing another patient. Fear of failing. Fear of caring. But neither admitted it. The argument escalated during the treatment planning session. Elijah pointed to the surgical timeline. We operate tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, Lily said, incredulous. She cried herself to sleep. Elijah, did you even talk to her? My job is not conversation. Your job is saving her life, Lily pressed, stepping closer. And right now, that means slowing down. He stood rigid, like a fortress refusing siege. You want me to base surgical timing on her emotions? That is not medicine. Yes, Lily said firmly. It is. Because she's not a heart on a screen. She's a terrified girl whose body listens to her fear. For a moment, Elijah's stern expression flickered. Something pained, defensive, deeply shaken. He masked it instantly. You're projecting, he said quietly. Lily's breath caught. The accusation hit a tender place. No, she whispered. I'm seeing what you refuse to see. The silence after that was charged, heavy, electric, intimate. Too intimate. Elijah looked away first. Later, in the hallway outside the patient's room, Lily watched through the window as the girl curled up in her blanket, trembling even in sleep. Elijah joined her unexpectedly, his footsteps soft for once. She's scared of me, he said, voice low. Lily turned to him. She's scared of dying, Elijah. You represent the thing she fears most and needs most. He swallowed hard, jaw tightening. Something vulnerable flashed across his face. Quick, fragile, almost invisible. Lily's heart softened at the sight. You don't have to be a machine, she said gently. You can let her see you care. Elijah's eyes lingered on Lily's face, searching, conflicted, drawn in ways he didn't understand and couldn't control. Then the vulnerability vanished. Walls, ice, armor. We operate tomorrow, he said again. But the words were quieter, less certain, as if he were trying to convince himself. Lily stepped closer, voice a soft challenge. If you push her now and anything goes wrong, will you ever forgive yourself? A direct hit. His breath faltered, just for a heartbeat. But he didn't answer. Several hours later, Lily caught sight of Elijah in the staff atrium. He stood alone, hands resting on the railing, staring out at the city with a haunted expression, a glimpse behind his armor. And when a male resident approached Lily with an overly friendly tone, smiling too much, praising her work, Elijah glanced over sharply. Too sharply. Not jealous. Just alert. Protective. Possessive? No, he'd never admit that. But the tension between them thickened, humming beneath every word. That evening, during the final prep discussion, Elijah ended the meeting abruptly when Lily challenged him again. You're not listening to her. And you're not listening to me. Elijah's eyes locked onto hers, intense enough to make her breath hitch. I hear you, Lily, he said quietly. More than you think. It wasn't an admission. But it wasn't a denial either. The ice was cracking deeper. The attraction, undeniable. The disagreement, unavoidable. And tomorrow, one of them would be proven right. Or their patient would pay the price. The surgical lights glowed like artificial suns, bleaching every shadow from the operating room. Elijah stood in the center of it all, mask on, hands raised, voice steady. Cold, precise, untouchable. On the table lay the trembling young girl, sedated now, her heartbeat fluttering softly on the monitors like frightened wings. Everyone in the room seemed tense, but Elijah wasn't. He couldn't be. He wouldn't be. Logic was his anchor. Data was his compass. Control was his oxygen. He clung to all three. Scalpel, he said calmly. The surgery began. What followed was a masterclass in perfection. Every incision was flawless. Every suture glided through tissue with practiced elegance. Every command was crisp, efficient, authoritative. Elijah moved like a conductor directing a symphony of metal and flesh, a man who trusted only in science, never in uncertainty. Even the nurses exchanged glances of awe. But Lily's earlier warning echoed faintly in the back of his mind, like a whisper under the roar of machines. She's not ready. She's terrified. Her body listens to her fear. He shut it out. Fear was noise. Emotion was noise. Only facts mattered. And the fact was, he could fix hearts. He had always fixed hearts. The surgery ended in perfect time. No complications. No mistakes. Not a single misstep. Elijah stepped back, chest rising with controlled satisfaction. This is a successful procedure, he announced. Even the anesthesiologist nodded. For a brief moment, Elijah allowed himself a quiet, private exhale. See, logic wins. He stripped off his gloves and left the room with the serene confidence of a man who believed he had proven everyone wrong, especially Lily. But the universe had other plans. 2 hours after surgery, the first alarm sounded. A shrill beep, sharp, invasive, cut through the recovery wing. Then another, and another. Her pressure's dropping, a nurse yelled. Elijah was already sprinting. He burst into the room just as the monitors erupted in chaos. Numbers plummeting, lines spiking. The girl on the bed was pale, trembling, fighting invisible demons beneath her half-conscious state. Her heart, his perfectly repaired heart, was spasming wildly. Damn it, what's happening? Elijah demanded, grabbing the chart. The graft is intact, sutures clean, no sign of rupture. This isn't surgical. It's autonomic shock, Lily said from behind him, voice shaking but steady. She's reliving the fear. Her body is rejecting the trauma you didn't let her process. Elijah froze. Not physically. Internally. Something inside him cracked. Quiet, devastating, irreversible. No, he whispered, staring at the convulsing ECG. No, this doesn't make sense. This shouldn't, this can't. But the evidence screamed louder than his denial. The girl was crashing. Because she had been terrified. Because he had ignored that terror. Because he had operated on a heart that wasn't ready to beat again. Lily stepped to the girl's side, taking her hand, grounding her with soft words Elijah couldn't hear because his own mind was collapsing in on itself. They fought for her for nearly an hour. Stabilization medications, sedation management, neurogenic shock countermeasures. Elijah tried everything. Everything clinical. Everything rational. Everything he believed in. Nothing worked. With every failed intervention, horror carved deeper lines into his face. He wasn't a surgeon in that moment. He was a man watching his worldview fall apart. Finally, the tremors eased. The girl's breathing slowed. The monitors steadied into fragile balance. She was alive. Barely. Elijah stood motionless at the foot of her bed, gloves trembling, eyes unfocused. He had saved her life, but he had also nearly destroyed it. And the realization hit him like a scalpel to the chest. Lily was right. After the crisis, the team dispersed, exhausted. Lily remained with the girl. Elijah remained standing alone in the hallway, silent, haunted. For the first time in years, he felt afraid. Afraid of his failure. Afraid of what it meant. Afraid of what it said about him. He pressed a hand to the wall to steady himself. His breathing shook. His vision blurred. His logic, once iron, now felt paper-thin. Lily approached softly, not triumphant, not vindicated, only compassionate. Elijah, she said gently, touching his arm. He flinched as if burned. I should have listened, he whispered. The words cracked at the edges. I thought I knew better. I always think I know better. This isn't about winning, Lily said. It's about her. And you care. That's why this hurts. He looked at her then, truly looked, with eyes stripped bare of arrogance, revealing pain, regret, and something deeper. A desperate need to understand the thing he had been running from his entire life. Emotion. Lily didn't lecture him, didn't scold him, didn't repeat her warnings. She simply stood beside him in silence. The kind of silence that heals instead of wounds. Elijah lowered his head, a man shaken to his core. Perfection had failed. Logic had cracked. And the ice around his heart was beginning to melt. One painful fracture at a time. The hallway outside ICU felt colder than the surgical theater ever had. Elijah stood there, fingers pressed to the glass, watching the monitors around patient 14 flicker like dying stars. A faint static hummed in the background, the kind of sound that usually soothed him because it meant data, consistency, order. Now it just sounded like breathing that was about to stop. Inside the room, the nurses moved with quiet urgency, adjusting lines, checking vitals, exchanging looks that blended confusion with fear. Patient 14's heart rate was plummeting in irregular dips, as if it could not decide whether to fight or surrender. Elijah swallowed a hard knot in his throat and stepped in. "Status," he demanded, his voice thin but sharp. Nurse Devereux hesitated. That hesitation, that single second of silence, hit him harder than any medical report. "Dr. Hale, we're out of standard options." Elijah snapped instantly toward the monitor. Heart rate unstable. Blood pressure erratic. No physical cause. No mechanical fault. No infection. No organ failure. Nothing that fit into any model he had ever built. He checked the readouts again, then again, then again, as though repetition could force reality back into order. His hands shook. He hid them in his lab coat pocket. Increase said. Sedation already at safe max. The nurse interrupted softly. His jaw locked. His breath shortened. The world narrowed to a tunnel. This isn't real. This cannot be real. The algorithm accounts for every variable. But the voice in his head was starting to sound like a man arguing with gravity. Suddenly, the door opened behind him. Lily stepped in. Not hurried. Not dramatic. Just present. The exact presence that had infuriated him for weeks because it refused to be dismissed. She took one look at the monitors and exhaled as though she had known this was coming all along. "Elijah." Her voice was gentle but steady. A voice meant for breaking news you don't want to hear. He didn't turn to her. He couldn't. "Not now," he said. "This is a medical crisis." "Exactly," she replied, stepping closer. "Which is why you need to stop trying to solve it with equations." Elijah spun around. His eyes were raw. Not angry, beyond angry. The look of a man whose scaffolding had collapsed and left him standing in midair. "If you're here to lecture me, I'm here because you're losing him." Silence. The machines beeped in uneven, panicked rhythms behind them. Lily approached the bedside, watching patient 14's face. The clenched jaw, the tension in the muscles, the micro-expressions of fear that Elijah had never learned to read. "This isn't physical," she whispered. "He's psychologically rejecting the state of his own body. He's terrified. Terrified to the point where his mind is shutting the body down." Elijah tightened his grip on the railing. "I know," he snapped, the word erupting from him before he could stop it. It startled even the staff. He lowered his head. "I know," he repeated, quieter now, brittle, exhausted. "I fixed everything. Every cell. Every millimeter. The surgery was perfect. It was perfect." Lily looked at him with something that wasn't pity, something stronger. "Perfection isn't connection, Elijah." His lips parted, breath trembling. A wound she couldn't see, but could feel. Patient 14's pulse dipped again. The room fell into a vacuum of beeps and sterile light. Elijah reached for the control panel to initiate another protocol. Any protocol, but Lily stepped between him and the machine. Not forceful, just absolute. There is nothing left to try on that device. For a moment, he looked at her like a drowning man looks at someone offering a rope made of smoke. "Then what?" he whispered. "What am I supposed to do? Watch him die?" Lily shook her head. "No. Let me in." He blinked. That wasn't what he expected. "His body has been stabilized every way modern medicine allows," she said. "But his mind has not. If I don't intervene now, he won't make it to morning." Elijah stepped back, expression torn open in a way he'd never shown another human being. "You want me to rely on you?" "No," she said. "I want you to save him by letting me help you." The words slid into the space between them, warm where everything else was cold. For the first time, Elijah truly listened. He didn't want to. He didn't trust it. But the crack in his armor had grown too wide to ignore. Behind them, the monitor let out a sharp alarm. Lily placed a hand gently on patient 14's arm. "Talk to me," she murmured to the patient, soft but powerful. "I know you're scared. I know your body feels wrong. But you're here. You survived. I need you to stay with us." The patient's breathing shifted, microscopic but real. Elijah stared, disbelief mixing with something far more vulnerable. Lily continued, grounding her voice, guiding the patient through slow breaths, soothing the panic he couldn't voice, connecting emotional threads Elijah had always cut out of the equation. Minute by minute, the vitals steadied. Minute by minute, the crisis receded. Minute by minute, Elijah's belief system fractured. When the monitors finally stabilized to safe levels, the nurses exhaled in relief. Lily stepped back, exhausted but steady. Elijah just stood there, silent, shattered, humbled. She turned to him. This is what I've been trying to tell you. He met her eyes. His voice was a whisper of a man rebuilt from ruins. I don't know how to do this. She took a breath. Then let me teach you. For the first time, Elijah didn't flinch from the offer. He simply nodded, small, fragile, but real. The ICE algorithm had finally cracked. And on the other side of the fracture was the beginning of something entirely new. The ICU felt strangely suspended in time, as if the whole floor had been exhaling for hours and finally ran out of breath. Elijah hadn't slept. He remained in the dim observation room, standing alone behind the glass, watching the young patient's vitals rise and fall in a slow, delicate rhythm. The echoes of yesterday replayed again and again in his mind. The crash, the panic, the moment standard protocols failed, and the impossible truth he still hadn't processed. He had followed Lily's lead, and the boy lived. The door behind him opened quietly. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. Lily's presence always shifted the temperature of a room, pulling warmth into places he'd spent years keeping cold. She stepped beside him without a word, her gaze following his toward the recovering patient. When she finally spoke, her voice carried that soft, steady timbre that somehow felt like safety. He's stable, she said. He's awake. And he's asking for you. Elijah blinked, unsure he heard correctly. For me? Lily nodded gently. He said he remembers your voice. That it helped him feel less alone. Something unfamiliar tightened in Elijah's chest, spreading through him like slow, painful heat. He didn't understand it, but he didn't recoil. Not this time. Lily watched him for a moment, her expression warm but not invasive. Elijah, she said quietly, what happened yesterday wasn't luck. It was connection, and you were part of it. He wanted to argue, to hide behind precision and data, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, something else slipped out, something vulnerable, unguarded, dangerously honest. Teach me. She studied him, genuinely moved. Then she nodded. Come with me, she said softly, and trust the process, even the parts that feel impossible to you. He followed her out of the observation room and into the brightly lit ICU chamber where the young patient sat upright, trembling. The boy's eyes flickered to Elijah immediately, afraid, disoriented, searching for something familiar in all the chaos. Elijah froze, every instinct telling him to step back. He didn't know how to handle fear. He knew how to cut, stitch, repair, calculate, but comfort, emotion? He felt hopelessly unqualified. Lily moved closer to him instead of the patient. She reached out and placed a hand on his forearm, the contact warm and grounding. He felt the shock of it all the way to his spine. Follow my lead, she whispered. You don't need to fix his emotions. Just be here. Her presence steadied him. Slowly, they approached the bed together. The patient's voice shook. I thought I was dying. Elijah swallowed hard. He glanced at Lily. She nodded once, encouraging him silently. Elijah stepped forward. You nearly did, he answered softly. And I pushed you too far. I made decisions based only on your body, not everything else you were feeling. His voice cracked. He didn't expect that. The patient stared at him, eyes glistening with fear and confusion. Elijah forced himself not to look away. I'm sorry, he said. I thought I was protecting you. The boy's breath steadied a little at the sincerity in his tone. Lily began guiding the patient through slow breathing, grounding him with gentle phrases while keeping Elijah beside her. She didn't move her hand from his arm, as if she knew he needed the anchoring as much as the boy did. Elijah mirrored her tone, her cadence, even the way she leaned in without crowding. It felt unnatural at first, almost embarrassing. But then, something shifted. The patient reached out with a trembling hand and grabbed Elijah's fingers. Elijah froze for half a heartbeat, then held on. He felt the boy's trembling, felt the desperate need behind it, felt, for the first time in years, that his presence alone mattered. Lily glanced at him with a warmth that made his stomach twist in a way that wasn't fear. She guided the patient through another cycle of breath. Elijah matched her rhythm, speaking softer, slower, letting himself be human, not a machine. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time blurred. Together they coaxed the patient back into his body, grounding him until his breathing steadied and his grip loosened. When the crisis finally passed, Elijah stepped back, overwhelmed by everything he was feeling. Relief, fear, gratitude, something painfully close to awe. He didn't realize his hands were shaking until Lily gently took one of them, grounding him with the same care she'd used on the patient. You did that, she whispered. You were with him, completely with him. Elijah looked at her, his voice barely functioning. It felt different. She gave a small, soft smile. Because it was real. The truth hit him in a quiet, devastating wave. All his logic, all his formulas, all his cold precision, none of it had ever reached a patient the way this moment had. Not once in years. Not since before the tragedy that shut him down. But with Lily beside him, guiding him, he finally stepped through the ice. For the first time in a very long time, Elijah felt alive. Elijah stood by the recovery room window, staring at the sterile lights above as if they could illuminate a truth deeper than any monitor ever could. The patient, his young charge, the girl who had barely survived under his precise hands, lay stabilized, her breathing even, her color returning to a healthy pink. For the first time in years, Elijah felt a strange, unfamiliar weight lift from his chest. The numbers had aligned, the vitals were steady, but the real miracle was something data could never quantify. She had chosen to live. He turned to Lily, who was quietly adjusting the 4 lines and murmuring gentle reassurances to the girl. Her presence radiated calm authority, not just as a therapist, but as a human being who understood the fragile architecture of hope. Elijah's throat tightened. He had been so certain that logic, precision, and control were the only paths to success, yet here she had guided the girl, and him, through the storm of emotion he had long dismissed. He began, but the words faltered. He had no rehearsed speech, no clinical report to hide behind. You were right, he said finally, voice low and deliberate. The mind matters just as much as the body. I failed to see that for too long. Lily looked up at him, her expression unreadable for a moment, before softening into a small, triumphant smile. Relief, pride, and a quiet warmth radiated from her. It's not about being right, she said. It's about helping them live. The realization hit Elijah like a current. He had spent his life chasing perfection in the operating room, creating flawless procedures and protocols, yet he had ignored the people those protocols were meant to serve. He had treated symptoms, not souls. Now, standing beside Lily, he understood the true measure of healing. He walked back to the main clinic floor, finding the staff gathered there, some whispering in disbelief, others staring with a mix of awe and hope. The monitors outside the room displayed clean, stable lines, but the energy in the room was far more palpable than any clinical readout. Nurses who had privately supported Lily's warnings now dared to nod openly, acknowledging the truth of what they had witnessed. Elijah cleared his throat, stepping forward. The room fell silent. Effective immediately, he said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of humility he rarely allowed himself. The Apex will integrate psychological care into every treatment plan. We are instituting what I am calling the Lily coefficient. Every patient must receive not only physical treatment, but emotional support, structured, validated, and mandatory. A murmur ran through the room. Shock, surprise, and skepticism were written plainly on the faces of the surgeons and staff. But Elijah held their gaze, unflinching. This is not optional, he continued. We will measure outcomes not only in survival statistics, but in mental resilience, patient engagement, and long-term well-being. We owe it to them, and we owe it to ourselves. He turned to Lily again. She met his gaze, and he saw not just the warmth of personal connection, but the reflection of a shared mission. In that look, all of his professional pride, all of his years of icy detachment, melted into a commitment far greater than any algorithm. The team slowly absorbed the announcement. Some crossed their arms skeptically, others whispered to one another in astonishment. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet acceptance began to grow. Training sessions, patient counseling protocols, and integrated therapy schedules would follow, and Elijah would ensure that no staff member, himself included, ignored the human side of medicine ever again. Later, as the clinic settled into a calm evening, Elijah found himself beside Lily in the now empty recovery room. He could hear the faint rhythmic beep of the monitors, steady and reassuring. He finally allowed himself to breathe, to feel the gravity of what had been achieved. Thank you, he said quietly, not as a superior to a subordinate, but as a man who had been reborn through trust. Lily smiled, placing a gentle hand on his arm. We saved her together. That's the point. Elijah nodded, feeling something he had not felt in years, a true sense of purpose, tempered by compassion. The Apex had changed, and he had changed with it. For the first time, he realized that medicine was not just about precision or outcomes. It was about connection. And in that connection, he found a spark of joy, a renewal of passion, and, perhaps most importantly, a path forward with Lily by his side, both as a partner in care and, slowly, in life itself. The clinic lights dimmed slightly as night fell, but inside, something brighter than any operating lamp burned, a human warmth, steady and resilient, lighting the way for a new era of healing. Elijah stepped onto the rooftop of the Apex. The city sprawled below him like a living organism of lights and movement. The sunset bathed the skyline in warm amber and gold, softening the edges of the sterile clinic walls he had known for so long. For the first time in years, he felt more than precision or duty. He felt alive, present, and, most startlingly, free. Behind him, Lily appeared, quiet and graceful, carrying a sense of calm that contrasted sharply with the years of chaos and pressure in the operating rooms below. She leaned against the railing, watching the sky shift colors, and for a moment, they simply existed together in silence. No monitors, no charts, no algorithms, just two human beings who had weathered storms together, both professional and deeply personal. "Elijah," she said softly, turning to him. "It's beautiful up here." He smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached his eyes, something rare and almost forgotten. "Not nearly as beautiful as what we've built," he replied. His voice held the quiet authority of a man who had mastered his craft, but now tempered with humility. "The Apex is no longer just a clinic. It's a place where science and compassion meet, where data and empathy coexist. And we did that together." Lily's lips curved into a smile of pride and warmth. "I didn't just change the clinic, Elijah. I think you changed too. You finally see it, don't you? The difference we can make when we treat patients as whole people." He took a step closer, feeling the gravity of every moment that had led here. The surgeries, the failed algorithms, the moments of panic and desperation, the triumphs and the mistakes. He reached for her hand, hesitating only briefly before intertwining their fingers. "I do," he admitted, "and I couldn't have done it without you. Your guidance, your insistence on looking beyond the vitals, it's reshaped everything. Not just the clinic, but me." Lily squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of all the battles fought, both visible and unseen. "And now?" she asked. "Now," he said, drawing a slow, steady breath, "we move forward, together, in work, in life. You'll be my partner, officially, in every sense. We'll continue healing, innovating, and showing the world that medicine doesn't have to sacrifice humanity for efficiency." A soft breeze carried the faint scent of city gardens from below, and the last rays of the sun caught Elijah's face, illuminating the transformation he had undergone. He was still the brilliant surgeon, still meticulous, still dedicated, but now he was whole. He had allowed warmth into his life, trust into his work, and love into his heart. Lily rested her head briefly on his shoulder, and for the first time, he did not recoil, did not retreat. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the steady beat of her heart, a rhythm that matched the pulse he had long sought to understand. Not in charts, not in numbers, but in connection. "The Apex will be different," she whispered. "A symbol of healing that respects both body and mind." "And so will we," he replied, looking out over the city as the twilight deepened. Together, guiding it forward. The sky shifted to deep indigo, and the first stars appeared, twinkling in quiet approval. Elijah felt a warmth bloom in his chest, a sense of completion and anticipation all at once. The frozen man he had once been had melted into someone capable of care, empathy, and partnership. They stayed there, hand in hand, watching the lights below and the stars above. In that moment, Elijah's world was balanced, science and emotion, logic and heart, ambition and compassion. And through Lily, he had rediscovered the brightest star of all, not in the night sky, but within himself, and in the shared light of their partnership. The Apex no longer stood as a fortress of cold precision. It glowed with human warmth, a testament to transformation, trust, and the enduring power of love in the practice of medicine. Thank you for listening to the story. Write your thoughts in the comments.